The soothing hum of classical music filled the dimly lit restaurant, its amber glow lending an air of intimacy to the night. Meredith adjusted her wineglass, her manicured nails tapping against the crystal edge as she leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Dylan across the table. His confident smile widened, the corners of his dark eyes crinkling. With his neatly styled hair and a suit tailored to perfection, Dylan exuded the charm and control of someone accustomed to commanding a room, and Meredith's attention. This evening was a covert celebration. It marked 6 months since their affair had begun, a tangled web spun in secrecy. Every fleeting touch of their hands over the polished wood table carried a charge of excitement. Meredith's laugh sparkled as she sipped her wine, savoring the warmth it brought, though it paled next to the electric pull of Dylan's presence. Their connection had bloomed amidst the monotony of corporate life. For years, Meredith had been laser-focused on her career, but Dylan, with his charisma and boldness, had disrupted her carefully ordered world. Their late-night projects and stolen conversations had gradually eroded the walls she had built. Dylan was everything her husband, Michael, wasn't: spontaneous, daring, and brimming with passion. He reminded her of the version of herself she thought she had lost. Michael. The thought of him crept in like a shadow, uninvited but impossible to ignore. Meredith pushed the guilt aside, focusing on Dylan's hand brushing hers, sending a jolt of energy up her arm. Dylan was recounting a story about their office antics, his smooth voice reeling her back in, but part of her mind wandered to the man she had left at home. Michael, her husband of 7 years, was her bedrock. Steady, thoughtful, and endlessly supportive, he had been the architect of their shared life. With Michael, there was comfort, dependability, and the quiet rhythm of a partnership built on trust. But somewhere along the way, the spark had dimmed, replaced by routines that now felt suffocating. When she was with Dylan, however, Meredith felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. He was impulsive where Michael was deliberate, thrilling where her marriage had become mundane. Dylan made her feel daring, invincible, a stark contrast to the careful, measured life she had cultivated. As Dylan leaned closer, laughter playing on his lips, Meredith's thoughts wavered between these two worlds. Her craving for Michael's stability and Dylan's exhilarating unpredictability tore at her, yet she clung to the duality as if it could sustain her forever. Meredith? Dylan's voice broke through her reverie. His hand rested lightly over hers, his touch a tether to the present. You're awfully quiet. What's on your mind? She tilted her head, a small smile softening her expression. Just thinking about how lucky I am to be here with you tonight, she said, her voice even but her heart beating erratically. Dylan raised his glass with a grin. Here's to 6 incredible months, he toasted. Meredith clinked her glass against his, a tremor of unease hidden beneath her polished exterior. She was defying every principle she had once held dear, but the thrill of the forbidden drowned out the whispers of regret. She wanted the best of both worlds, the grounding security of Michael and the intoxicating adventure Dylan offered. Leaning closer, Dylan's eyes glinted with mischief. Let me guess, he teased. Michael crossed your mind just now? Meredith chuckled, deflecting his words with a wave of her hand. Michael? He's fine. He's been preoccupied lately, though. He's been helping his parents with some things at their old farm. It's been a lot for him to handle. Dylan leaned back, his smile curious. A farm? Your husband's got country roots. I never would have guessed. Meredith laughed softly, a blush creeping into her cheeks. He's not exactly the rugged cowboy type. Dylan's smirk turned sly. A real man needs passion, risk, and a sense of adventure. Life's too short to be cautious. His voice dropped, his gaze locking with hers. After dinner, I'll show you exactly what I mean. Meredith raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a playful smile. Oh. Should I be worried? He leaned in, his voice low and teasing. Worried? Only if you're not ready for a night to remember. Their exchange was interrupted as the waiter arrived, setting 2 covered plates on the table. Pardon me, Meredith said, confused. We didn't order dessert. The waiter clasped his hands behind his back, smiling. It's on the house. A small treat from the chef. Meredith turned to Dylan, suspicion mingling with amusement. Was this your doing? Dylan shook his head, his grin widening. Not me. But hey, I'll take credit if you're impressed. Meredith's laugh rang out, her earlier tension melting away. Maybe it's a sign, she said, lifting the lid to reveal the dessert. A little cosmic approval for our unique arrangement. Dylan's dark eyes sparkled with intrigue, his confidence unshaken. Or maybe the universe knows how to keep life interesting. The faint clink of glasses and soft murmurs of conversation formed a gentle undercurrent to the restaurant's ambience. Dylan raised his wineglass, his confident smile glinting under the warm lights. Two signs from the universe, he quipped. Meredith chuckled, their laughter blending seamlessly into the restaurant's muted symphony. For a moment, the world outside their shared table didn't exist. The illicit excitement of their connection felt untouchable, almost as if the universe itself had granted them permission to defy convention. The lightness of the moment, however, was shattered when Dylan reached to uncover his dessert. With theatrical flair, he removed the silver lid, revealing a perfectly frosted chocolate cake. But the centerpiece, a joker playing card stabbed into the confection, turned his confident smirk into a puzzled frown. What kind of sick joke is this? Dylan muttered, plucking the card free. He turned it over in his hand, examining it like a strange artifact. Meredith, suddenly uneasy, hesitated before uncovering her own dessert. The tension in her chest tightened as she removed the lid. Beneath it sat another chocolate cake, its glossy surface gleaming under the dim lights. But something small and metallic reflected back at her. A ring. Her stomach lurched as recognition set in. It wasn't just any ring, it was Michael's wedding band. Her hand flew to her mouth. Dylan, she whispered, her voice trembling. This is Michael's ring. What is this? Dylan leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. Wait, what? That's his? Are you sure? His tone was skeptical, but Meredith's pallor silenced him. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. How could Michael's ring have found its way here, to this table, at this moment? The restaurant's walls seemed to close in, the warm ambience now oppressive. Before she could speak again, a figure loomed over their table. A man, sharp-featured and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, slipped into the empty chair without asking. His movements were calm, his demeanor exuding control. The intensity in his gaze made Meredith's breath hitch. Good evening, the man began smoothly, his voice as measured as his appearance. I apologize for the intrusion, but I'll only need a moment of your time. Dylan's expression darkened. Who the hell are you? He snapped, his bravado flaring. And what's with this creepy stunt? The man raised a hand, his calm unshaken. My name is Oliver, he said evenly. And I suggest you keep your voice down. Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. Reaching into his jacket, Oliver produced a slim leather folder, setting it gently in front of Meredith. Before you open this, he said, turning to Dylan, I'd like to make you an offer. Dylan narrowed his eyes, gripping the joker card like a weapon. An offer? What kind of scam is this? Oliver's lips twitched into a faint smile. You seem like a man who appreciates a good gamble. How about a wager? $50,000. He paused, letting the figure sink in. If you agree, we'll consider the matter closed, and you'll leave here unscathed. Dylan's laughter was harsh, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. 50 grand? Is this a joke? What's next? You want me to play poker with you in the alley? Let me guess. This is Michael's doing. He's your client, isn't he? Oliver inclined his head slightly. You're correct. This arrangement comes at Mr. Michael's request. Meanwhile, Meredith's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were pristine divorce papers, each line stark against the cream-colored pages. Her stomach dropped. No. This can't be happening, she whispered, her voice barely audible. How could he? Dylan leaned over to glance at the papers, his expression shifting from curiosity to amusement. Well, he drawled, his tone mocking. Looks like Michael finally found his spine. Good for him. Honestly, Meredith, this is a win for you. Let him sulk on his ranch or wherever he broods. Meredith's voice cracked as she tried to grasp the enormity of what was happening. Dylan, this isn't just about the divorce. There's so much at stake, our finances, the house. This is a disaster. Dylan shrugged, utterly unbothered. Relax. We'll hire a lawyer. Your husband's a pushover. This will blow over. Oliver rose smoothly, his movements as deliberate as his words. So, he said, his gaze fixed on Dylan, I take it you're refusing the offer. Damn right, I am, Dylan snapped, his voice loud enough to draw a few disapproving stares. Nobody threatens me. Especially not some suit sent by a guy like Michael. Oliver's expression didn't falter, though a faint sigh escaped him. Very well, he said, adjusting his cuffs. I'll leave you to your evening. Meredith, he added, his tone quiet but firm, you'll find a surprise waiting at home. Good night. With that, he turned and strode away, the soft echo of his polished shoes fading into the background. Meredith stared after him, her heart pounding. A surprise, she murmured, her voice trembling. Dylan, I have to go. Now. Dylan leaned back, unconcerned. Relax, he said, reaching for her hand. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. Trust me. But Meredith wasn't listening. Her mind was already racing ahead, terrified of what awaited her at home. Angela's silence filled the car as the streetlights passed in ghostly streaks. Her thoughts churned, a maelstrom of fear and confusion. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, but her body remained frozen, gripped by dread. Next to her, Dylan seemed unfazed, his fingers tapping along to the rhythm of a song on the radio. His casual demeanor only deepened her unease. What if Michael's there, she murmured, her voice so faint it almost disappeared into the hum of the engine. Dylan let out a short laugh, dismissive and arrogant. Then we're lucky, he said, glancing at her with a cocky smirk. I'll handle him. He's probably shaking in his boots already. Angela's breath caught, her hand trembling as she brushed away a tear. Maybe we shouldn't go, she whispered, her voice breaking. This has gone too far. I didn't mean for. Angela. Dylan's tone cut her off, light but sharp. It's too late for second thoughts. If Michael's ready to sign the papers, then what's the problem? He's the one throwing in the towel. Trust me, it's better this way. He leaned back, his confidence unshaken. Let me deal with it. He'll learn his lesson. Her stomach knotted tighter with every turn they took toward her street. By the time they arrived, Angela's fear had metastasized into something suffocating. The house loomed ahead, the windows glowing eerily against the night sky. Dylan pulled into the driveway with his usual theatrical flair, killing the engine and stepping out as though nothing was amiss. Let's get this over with, he said, stretching his arms before striding toward the door. Angela followed reluctantly, every step heavier than the last. Her breath quickened, her pulse racing as she unlocked the door. The air inside was cold, still. The silence wasn't comforting, it pressed against her like a tangible force. She flicked on the lights, revealing a space that felt unfamiliar. Something was wrong. The realization struck as her gaze darted around the living room. Many of Michael's belongings were gone, his jacket from the coat rack, his books from the shelf. Dylan sauntered in behind her, his laugh echoing off the walls. See? I told you. The guy's a coward. Packed up and ran off. Probably crying into a whiskey back at that ranch of his. Angela ignored him, her attention snagged by the table. At its center sat a sleek black folder, its presence radiating malice. She approached cautiously, her hands trembling as she flipped it open. Her breath hitched at the sight of a note written in Michael's familiar, steady hand. Angela. I know everything. I've known for months. The evidence is in this folder. You won't walk away with anything but the weight of your decisions. And, for the record, take a closer look at the man you left me for. Angela's heart pounded as she turned to the next page, revealing photographs and documents. Her eyes widened in horror as she sifted through them, pictures of Dylan with other women. One photo showed him at a candlelit dinner with a striking brunette. Another caught him in a hotel lobby, a blonde's hand resting possessively on his arm. A third showed him at a dimly lit bar, leaning in close to a redhead with a flirtatious grin. She shoved the folder toward Dylan, her voice shaking. What is this? She demanded. Dylan, are these real? Have you been? She couldn't finish the question. Dylan's smirk faltered for just a moment before he recovered, rolling his eyes. Seriously? This is what he's trying to pull. He plucked a photo from the folder and held it up, scoffing. This one? That's a client from years ago. We had one meeting, and Michael twists it into this. He jabbed at another image. And her? She's an old friend from college. A quick catch-up over coffee. These pictures are nothing, Angela. Just moments blown out of proportion. Angela's tears streaked down her face as she struggled to process his explanation. But, there are so many. It doesn't feel like nothing. Dylan stepped closer, his hands gripping her shoulders firmly. Angela, he said, his voice steady and insistent. Think about it. Do you see me kissing anyone? Touching them inappropriately? No, because these are innocent. Michael is trying to break us apart. Don't let him win. His words were smooth, reassuring, but they failed to soothe the storm inside her. You're sure? You're absolutely sure this is just a setup? Dylan softened his tone, leaning in as his hands slid down to clasp hers. I promise you, Angela. None of this matters. Michael's playing mind games because he can't stand losing you. But I'm not going anywhere. Trust me. Angela blinked back fresh tears, her resolve crumbling under the weight of his confidence. But as her gaze drifted to the photos once more, a seed of doubt took root, a whisper that refused to be silenced. Angela's doubts wavered, then crumbled under Dylan's relentless reassurances. She nodded hesitantly, clinging to his confidence as if it were a lifeline. But Dylan's mind churned behind his calm exterior. Panic simmered beneath his polished facade, his thoughts scrambling to stay one step ahead of Samuel's game. As Angela's eyes drifted back to the folder, she noticed another note tucked beneath the shredded remnants. She unfolded it with trembling hands, her breath catching as she read. Tell Dylan he can buy his way out of this mess with a $100,000 transfer to my account. A small price for peace of mind. Her voice wavered. Dylan, there's more. She passed him the note. Dylan's face darkened, the words stoking the fire of his fury. $100,000, he snapped, crumpling the paper in his fist. What does he think this is, a cheap shakedown? That bastard thinks he can extort me. With a growl, Dylan began tearing through the folder's remaining contents, the sound of ripping paper filling the room. This is ridiculous, he seethed. Tomorrow, I'm calling the best lawyer in the city. We'll drag him through the courts until he's begging for mercy. He wants a fight. He's got one. Angela watched him, her emotions swinging wildly between fear and a flicker of hope. Dylan's determination burned brightly, cutting through the chaos of her thoughts. For a moment, she believed he could shield her from the storm. Dumping the shredded remnants into the trash, Dylan turned to her, his tone resolute. We're not letting him win, Angela. This is just another scare tactic. Trust me, I've got everything under control. She nodded slowly, wiping her damp cheeks. His confidence, though brash, was steadying. It gave her a fragile sense of stability in an otherwise crumbling world. Dylan poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one across the table. Here, he said, his voice softer now. You need this. Angela took the glass with shaking hands, the amber liquid trembling as she brought it to her lips. Dylan leaned closer, his gaze pinning her in place. Angela, he murmured, his voice low and intimate, this is your house now. Without him. Let's take this moment and make it ours. Angela blinked, startled by the sudden shift in his tone. Dylan, this doesn't feel right. Right? He chuckled softly, his grin widening. No, this isn't about right or wrong. This is about us. You're free now. Samuel doesn't own you. He never did. He leaned in, his charisma wrapping around her like a net. Trust me, you'll feel better once you let it all go. His words, his tone, his relentless charm, they chipped away at her resistance, piece by piece. Finally, her resolve broke. Dylan swept her into his arms, his victory sealed, as he carried her to the master bedroom. By morning, the tension of the night before lingered like a shadow. Dylan, already dressed in his tailored suit, adjusted his tie in the mirror. His confidence was unshaken, his focus sharp. Take the day off, he said casually, planting a kiss on Angela's forehead. I'll tell the office you're sick. You need to rest. Angela, still groggy, nodded wordlessly as he picked up his briefcase. Don't worry about a thing, Dylan added, flashing her a reassuring smile. I'll start making calls to lawyers. We'll tear Samuel apart. She watched him leave, his presence filling the room even as the door clicked shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Angela sat by the window, staring blankly at the street as steam curled from her untouched coffee. This is a new beginning, she whispered, trying to convince herself. Samuel's gone. It's time to move forward. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. She glanced at the screen, a notification from her bank. Your account has been frozen. Panic gripped her chest. She scrambled to log into her banking app, her fingers fumbling as she entered her credentials. The screen loaded, and her worst fear materialized, the joint savings account was empty. Every cent gone. No, she breathed, her pulse hammering. This can't be happening. Desperation surged as she dialed Samuel's number. The line rang twice before going to voicemail. Samuel, she pleaded, her voice cracking. What have you done? Call me back. Please. The minutes stretched into an eternity before her phone finally rang. She snatched it up without hesitation. Samuel, she said breathlessly, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. But it wasn't Samuel's voice on the other end. It was calm, measured, and all too familiar. Good morning, Angela, Oliver said smoothly. I believe we have a few things to discuss. Samuel. Angela snapped, her voice a mix of fury and desperation. You had no right to do this. Freezing my account. Taking all the money. You're a coward, hiding behind lawyers and bank notifications. We need to talk about this now, or I swear. Samuel's voice interrupted her, calm but sharp, like a blade slicing through her rant. Angela, you made your decision when you betrayed me. You'll get your explanations in court. Until then, there's nothing left to say. You can't just. Enough, Samuel interjected, his tone firm and final. I'm done with your excuses. You didn't even bother calling me last night, did you? You were too busy. If you have questions, they go through my lawyer. Don't call me again. Before she could muster a response, the line went dead. Angela stared at her phone, her hand trembling as the weight of his words settled on her. Anger and fear churned in her chest, leaving her feeling hollow. Her first instinct was to call Dylan. He'd know what to do. After a few rings, he answered, his tone unusually curt. "What's wrong now?" he asked, irritation lacing his voice. "Samuel froze my account," Angela said, her voice cracking. "He drained everything. The savings, it's all gone." Dylan exhaled sharply, muttering a curse under his breath. "Angela, that's the least of our problems." Her heart sank. "What do you mean?" she whispered, dreading his answer. "Samuel's a sneaky bastard," Dylan spat. "He went to our bosses and told them everything, about us, the affair." The words hit Angela like a physical blow. "What?" she gasped, her breath catching. "What did you say? What happened?" "I told them he's unstable, that he's spiraling because of the divorce and trying to drag us down with him," Dylan said, frustration bleeding into his tone. "Luckily, I've got enough clout that they didn't fire me outright. But this isn't over. We need to clean this mess up, fast." Angela clutched her phone, her pulse racing. "What do we do now?" Dylan's voice shifted, taking on a sharp, commanding edge. "I'm calling in some favors and hiring a lawyer. But I need something from you, Samuel's number. I need to talk to him directly. Man to man." Angela hesitated, her grip tightening on the phone. Handing over Samuel's number felt like crossing an irreversible line, but Dylan's confidence steadied her nerves. "Fine," she murmured, reciting the number. "Good," Dylan said, his tone softening slightly. "Don't worry, Angela. I'll fix this." When the call ended, Angela sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The flickering hope that Dylan could salvage their situation was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. In his office, Dylan paced furiously, his jaw clenched as he dialed Samuel's number. When the line connected, he wasted no time. "Listen, you smug little punk," Dylan growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You've started a war you can't win. You crossed every line, and now this is personal." For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then, Samuel's calm, mocking chuckle filtered through the line. It stoked Dylan's fury like gasoline on a fire. "Here's what's going to happen," Dylan snarled. "You're going to stop this nonsense. Divorce Angela the normal way, no games, no tricks. And while you're at it, you'll call my bosses and retract every baseless accusation you made. Admit you've been acting out of jealousy and spite. Fix this, or you'll regret it." Samuel's voice, smooth and unhurried, was laced with quiet amusement. "Regret it?" he repeated. "Dylan, the only regret I have is not confronting this sooner. I already gave you a way out, a donation, as a show of good faith. But you turned that down. Now we're here." Dylan's grip tightened on the phone. "You think this is a game? You think you can intimidate me? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Samuel replied coolly. "A man so blinded by arrogance that he thinks he's untouchable. Let me assure you, Dylan, you're not. You've made this personal, not me." Dylan's teeth clenched, his anger threatening to boil over. "You're pushing your luck, Samuel. And you're overestimating yours," Samuel countered, his tone darkening. "This isn't a negotiation, Dylan. It's a reckoning. You and Angela have no one to blame but yourselves." With that, the line went dead, leaving Dylan gripping the phone in silent rage. Samuel's tone remained measured, his words sharp as ice. "Here's my final offer, Lucas. Transfer $200,000 to my account. Call it restitution for what you've taken from me. Decline, and you'll face the consequences. This isn't a threat, it's a certainty." Lucas's anger erupted, his voice a snarl. "You think I'm going to hand over that kind of money? Who do you think you are? I've got friends, real power. You've got nothing but petty games. Keep pushing, Samuel, and I'll bury you so deep no one will even remember your name. Samuel's response was calm, almost unnervingly so. Try it, he said coolly. But remember, Lucas, every decision you've made so far has only strengthened my case. The stakes are set. Goodbye. The line went dead before Lucas could reply. He slammed the phone onto his desk with enough force to make his papers scatter, muttering curses under his breath. That arrogant bastard, he spat. He thinks he can back me into a corner. But even as the words left his lips, a shadow of doubt flickered in his mind. For the first time in years, Lucas felt the faint but undeniable sting of vulnerability. The first day of the divorce trial was nothing short of a disaster. Samuel's lawyer, a poised woman with a commanding presence, presented a relentless stream of evidence. Photos, text messages, and meticulously constructed timelines painted a damning picture of Angela's betrayal and Lucas's involvement. The courtroom buzzed with tension as each piece of evidence was laid bare. Angela's lawyer, a silver-tongued strategist with a reputation for buying time, rose to object. Your Honor, he said smoothly, I must contest the admission of this evidence until we can verify its authenticity. These materials are, at best, questionable and could unjustly prejudice this case. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed but willing to entertain the argument. Proceed cautiously, counselor, he said, his voice laced with skepticism. Angela's lawyer continued, his tone firm and persuasive. We owe it to the integrity of these proceedings to ensure that only verified, admissible evidence is considered. My clients have already been unfairly maligned by the opposing counsel's theatrics. It was a clever maneuver, a tactic designed to delay the inevitable. From his seat in the gallery, Lucas smirked, his confidence creeping back. He leaned toward Angela and murmured, Don't worry. We just need a little more time, and this whole mess will go away. When the hearing adjourned, the judge scheduled the next session for later in the month. Angela's hands trembled as she gathered her things, her face pale. Lucas, however, seemed unfazed. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Relax, babe, he said with a cocky grin. This is nothing. I've got everything under control. That evening, Lucas locked himself in his office, making call after call to his contacts. He leaned on every favor, tapped into every resource, desperate to shift the balance in his favor. He was in the middle of drafting yet another email when his phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his heart skip a beat, boss. Lucas, came the curt voice on the other end, devoid of its usual warmth. I need you in my office. Now. The line went dead before Lucas could respond. A chill crept up his spine. His boss wasn't known for idle meetings, especially not at this hour. Trouble was brewing, and Lucas could feel it in his bones. When Lucas entered the office, his usual air of confidence was noticeably absent. His boss, a stern man with an unyielding gaze, motioned for him to sit. The silence was suffocating as Lucas lowered himself into the chair. Lucas, the boss began, his tone sharp and unforgiving, I'll be blunt. The scandal involving Angela should have been grounds for immediate termination. Your behavior reflects poorly on this company, and I'm not in the business of tolerating embarrassment. Lucas leaned forward, his voice calm but insistent. Sir, this is a personal matter being exploited by Angela's vindictive husband. The court will settle it soon enough, and it won't impact our operations. The boss's gaze hardened. This isn't about your affair, Lucas. It's about something far more serious. I've been reviewing our financial records, and what I found is deeply troubling. Lucas's stomach tightened. What exactly are you talking about? The boss leaned back, steepling his fingers as his piercing eyes locked onto Lucas's. Fraud. Advertising funds redirected to shell companies. Money siphoned off and pocketed. The evidence is extensive, Lucas, and it points directly to you. The words hit like a hammer. Lucas's breath caught, and for a moment, the air seemed to leave the room. He forced a laugh, hollow and defensive. That's ridiculous. I've been nothing but loyal to this company. If there's been a mistake, There's no mistake, the boss cut in, his voice as cold as steel. I've already had the records independently verified. Lucas, you've put this company at risk. I'm giving you one chance to explain yourself before I take this to the board, and the authorities. Lucas's mind raced. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words, his usual charm and quick wit deserting him in the face of undeniable evidence. For the first time, Lucas realized the walls were closing in, and there might be no way out. Lucas's throat tightened, his confidence unraveling. This is absurd, he sputtered. I would never. The boss raised a hand, cutting him off. Without a word, he pressed a button on his desk. Moments later, the head of security entered, accompanied by a sharp-eyed man in a tailored suit. This is Mr. Carter, the boss said, nodding toward the newcomer. He works with the Department for the Investigation of Financial and Economic Crimes. For now, this investigation is unofficial. But if what we found is true, it won't stay that way for long. You could be looking at substantial fines, maybe even prison. Lucas's breath hitched as his confidence cracked wide open. This is a setup, he stammered, his voice rising. Someone's trying to destroy me, Samuel, maybe. He's the one behind all this. The boss tilted his head, scrutinizing him with a cold, calculating gaze. By the way, Lucas, do you play poker? Lucas blinked, thrown off balance. What? No. I mean, sometimes. Just for fun. The boss slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs of Lucas sitting at poker tables in dimly lit rooms, surrounded by seedy characters. Each image felt like a bullet to his already fragile composure. People say you've got quite the streak, the boss said icily. Big wins when you're lucky, but even bigger losses when you're not. Lucas paled, his fingers twitching as he fumbled for an excuse. This isn't what it looks like. It's harmless. Just entertainment. Harmless. The boss's expression hardened. You've jeopardized this company's reputation, Lucas. That's far from harmless. From now on, every move you make will be scrutinized. Lucas didn't get the chance to respond. Security escorted him out, his mind spinning with panic. Back in his office, he sank into his chair, gripping his head. The walls were closing in, and for the first time in years, he had no answers. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his spiraling thoughts. A text from Samuel lit up the screen, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Confidence." Lucas hurled the phone onto his desk with a curse. Moments later, it buzzed again, a call from Angela. Lucas, she began, her voice shaking, we need to talk. Let's meet for dinner. We have to figure this out together. Lucas's patience snapped. I'm done solving your problems, Angela. Figure it out yourself. Why the hell did you drag me into this mess in the first place? Lucas, please. I don't care, he barked, slamming his finger onto the end call button. Without hesitation, he blocked her number. Angela sat on the edge of her bed, the phone slipping from her hand as tears streamed down her face. Everything she had clung to, Lucas, her marriage, her stability, was gone. She buried her face in her hands, the crushing weight of her choices suffocating her. The fallout came swiftly. Days later, Angela was called into her boss's office and unceremoniously fired. This company can't afford the reputational damage your scandal has caused, her boss had said, his voice devoid of sympathy. The same day, news broke that Lucas was under formal investigation for financial fraud. Her divorce was finalized with brutal efficiency. Samuel's overwhelming evidence ensured she walked away with nothing, not the house, not alimony, not even the car. Saddled with mounting legal fees, Angela was forced to take out loans just to survive. Her new job paid poorly, and the repetitive tasks were a daily reminder of how far she had fallen. Every night, she cried herself to sleep, haunted by the life she had destroyed. Lucas fared no better. His plush lifestyle evaporated as his assets were seized and his accounts frozen. He moved into a cramped apartment, the walls closing in on his once mighty ego. The investigation into his fraudulent schemes left no stone unturned. His lawyer's grim warnings loomed over him, fines were inevitable, but prison was likely. Each passing day brought new humiliations. Samuel's meticulous evidence exposed every dark corner of Lucas's life, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As he stared at the stacks of documents detailing his crimes, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut: he had lost. Samuel had outplayed him at every turn. Meanwhile, at his parents' ranch, Samuel felt a rare sense of peace. The chaos of betrayal had been replaced by quiet clarity. The private investigator he'd hired had proven worth every penny, uncovering truths that had allowed him to take back control of his life. Now, with the divorce finalized and the burdens of his marriage lifted, Samuel focused on what truly mattered: his family and the future. He had no desire to gloat or look back. The satisfaction of reclaiming his dignity was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in a golden glow, Samuel stood on the porch, a faint smile playing on his lips. The past was behind him, and he was finally free to start anew.